So I wanted to give a bit of an update on what's been going on with Israel and Palestine. And this was like big news that hit last week. And we will be watching some of it, not all of it. But the ICC prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, is seeking out arrest warrants for the leaders of Hamas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes over October 7th in Gaza. And this is fucking really big news because in terms of this happening, like, because the ICC has like issued, or at least is seeking out arrest warrants. Like they have done so with like many different leaders and shit like that, but it's never been with someone who is like in conjunction with the West. But Benjamin Netanyahu in this case, like obviously Israel works very closely with the U.S. government, and this is the first time anything like this has happened. But let's just read out this article right here. The International Crime Court is seeking arrest warrants for Hamas leader in Gaza and Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity over the October 7th attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. The court's prosecutor Karim Khan told CNN's Kristan Amanpour in an exclusive interview on Monday. And the reason why I am not really like focusing that much on the Hamas leaders is because this isn't like surprising in terms of like the ICC going after people like them. Because here's the thing, I'm very much pro-Palestine, but what Hamas did during October 7th is a war crime. Like it is wrong, and I've said that multiple times. So, but the thing is, like them going after Hamas for that, being like they committed war crimes on October 7th. This is wrong. We're going after them. That's not unprecedented because they are an enemy of the West, and that's what the ICC has mostly done. I mean, literally, this prosecutor who was seeking out these arrest warrants was very much put in that position, but because of the Western influence of Israel and U.S. and the USA. But the reason why it's very surprising for them looking for an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu is because, like I said before, it's very unwarranted. It's very surprising. Hopefully, it means a step in the right direction, and we'll talk about that when we get to the other updates I want to talk about with the UN and other countries in the Western world, like calling for a Palestinian state. But we'll continue with this article right here for the time being. Khan said the ICC's prosecution team is also seeking warrants for Israel's defense minister, I don't know how to pronounce that, as well as two other top Hamas leaders. The move against the Israeli politicians marked the first time the ICC has targeted the top leader of a close ally of the United States. The decision puts Netanyahu in the company of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, for whom the ICC issued an arrest warrant over Moscow's war on Ukraine. By applying for the arrest warrants against Israel and Hamas leaders in the same action, Khan's office risks attracting criticism that it placed a terror organization and an elected government on equivalent footing. The whole thing of being like, oh, you can't put Israel in the same action because they're an elected government is very stupid because it's based on their actions, and their actions are very similar. Like, again, what Hamas did on October 7th is wrong. But Israel has done nothing better. It's been incredibly disgusting in its execution. I mean, literally, just yesterday, they fucking bombed a displacement camp in Rafah. But again, we'll talk about that because that's like the most recent thing. I'm trying to go in like order what's been going on. I don't care what the structure is of these organizations. Both of them are doing terrible shit. Hamas did terrible things with October 7th. And Israel is continuously doing terrible shit to the people of Palestine. Like, I don't care what the structure of their organizations is. They're still doing terrible shit. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more to talk about. There's like, at least with this article, there is an interview we'll watch. Again, probably not the entire thing. So we're just gonna watch this interview where he'll get more into like his decision.
First and foremost, explain to me exactly what you're asking for and who you are charging. Today, Cristiano, we've applied for warrants to the pretrial chamber of the International.
Yes, I'm very much am I against Palestine? No, I'm not. Absolutely not. I am critical of what Hamas did on October 7th, but at the same time, like, I'm much rather but I'm not against Palestine at all. What did Hamas did? October 7th. Like, it's still, here's the thing. I honestly understand why they did it, but that doesn't condone the fact that they did terrible things, and what they did is a war crime. Like, you can still be on the Palestinian side without necessarily agreeing with what Hamas did was right. Am I still going to support them more than the Israeli government? Yeah, because I do believe they're trying to do what they're doing for the best of Palestinian people, but that doesn't mean that they get to kill innocent civilians. And I still will be way more critical of Israel because in terms of the amount of people that Hamas has killed versus the difference of the people that Israel has killed is vastly different. You don't know what Israel is doing since 20 and 30 years. I understand they have a very long history, but that still doesn't make killing innocent civilians right. Don't you see what? Yeah, I literally have it pulled up right here. Again, I'm doing like a timeline of what's been going on in the last week, and I'll eventually get to that. But yeah, I already talked about this somewhat. They literally bombed a displacement camp. Let's talk about the old things. It's not old. This happened a week ago. This is still very important. Like the ICC going after a ally of the West is something very unprecedented, so it should be talked about. Like this is a big deal. All right, let's just get back to this.
Criminal court in relation to 3 individuals that are Hamas members. Sinwar, who's in charge on the ground.
That's Yahya Sinwar?
Absolutely. Dave, who's in charge of the Al-Qasim Brigade, and Hania, who's one of their political bureau based in Doha.
Let me just, for everybody to understand, Yahya Sinwar is the head of what they call the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, the military operation, or even wider. Mohammad Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, otherwise known as Dave, Commander-in-Chief of the military wings Al-Qassam Brigade, and Ismail Hania, head of the Hamas Political Bureau. What are the charges?
The charges are extermination, murder, taking of hostages, rape and sexual assault in detention. So these are the key crimes that are alleged to have been committed by these 3 individuals. The world was shocked on the 7th of October when people were ripped from their bedrooms, from their homes, from the different kibbutzim in Israel. And people have suffered enormously, and we have a variety of evidence to support the applications that we've submitted to the judges.
And just tell us what the evidence is. Obviously, the world has seen the real-time images. The Israeli government has put out videos, which is shared to the UN and others, journalists, about what happened. There are body cams on many of the Hamas fighters, whoever was there at the time. Is that the evidence, or do you have more?
We have more. We have authenticated videos and photographs. We have CCTV camera pictures. We have eyewitness evidence. We have evidence of survivors. I mean, it's remarkable. The victims and survivors that have from Israel that have engaged with my office have this righteous demand for justice and accountability. They've come here. I've also met them in the different kibbutzim, and they want justice and accountability. So we have also expert evidence. So there's a whole variety of information that we have authenticated that we think is relevant and
they are just talking to Hamas, so why don't they send their troops in order to find Hamas? Let's believe for a time Hamas is terrorists. NYL, Israel bombing the places where people live. Like, yeah, Israel was obviously fucking terrible. Here's the thing, like, as much as, even though I do criticize Hamas for October 7th, to me, the lesser evil is still them. Like, what they like, their one instant of terror is nothing compared to what Israel has done within the last few months and years. And yeah, like, obviously their approach to it is just a big sign that they don't actually care about killing Hamas. They just want to kill Palestinians.
And that is sufficient, we say, to sustain the crimes that we put forward to the judges.
You have also issued warrants against the top political and military leadership of the government of the State of Israel.
We've applied for warrants. Of course, the judges must determine whether or not to issue them, but we've applied today, we'll apply for warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also Minister of Defense Gallant for crimes of causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict. And the sad thing really is in relation to both categories. I have been saying repeatedly in Cairo in October last year, at the Rafah crossing, on Israeli television, in Ramallah, everywhere I can, to the parties to the conflict: comply now, don't complain later. And of course, hostages have not been released, that insidious crime.
But that's also because Israel refused to go to the table. Literally, like, not that long ago, and this was something I talked about the last time I talked about Israel. Israel, like, before the invasion of Rafah, Israel literally refused to meet Hamas at a negotiation table to exchange hostages. They refused. Like, Hamas wants to let the hostages go. They're keeping them because they know it's a political weapon, but they want to give you the hostages for your hostages, like the people of Palestine that you're keeping. So if you want the hostages gone so badly, make the fucking deal. And that's what a lot of people in Israel are like protesting, because most of them, they don't give a fuck about Palestinians. There's a lot of people in Israel who don't think that Benjamin Netanyahu is going far enough with his slaughter of Palestinians. But there is a lot of protesters out there who are against him in the fact that he's killing hostages. Not the hostages that they have, the hostages that Hamas has. The people who are taken. Because he's such a bloodthirsty animal that he doesn't care if, the people that he supposedly cares about are being slaughtered when he's bombing all these innocent buildings. Well, now should I say Hitler did the right thing? You almost had me in the first part. I was a little worried when you said that. So you might want to find your phrasing a bit. I almost thought you were saying like Hitler should have. Alright. But that's just on me. Well, now should I say Hitler did the right thing? No, I won't say why would I, because killing people is not the right thing to ever do. Yeah, you almost had me in the first part. I was like, am I going to have to ban this person or what?
It continues for so many innocent Israelis that are in custody, are held hostage by Hamas, and families that are waiting for their return. And of course, we see pictures of starving children, of emaciated children. We have a variety of evidence to support, not polemics, but evidence that's been forensically analysed to sustain the charge also of starvation being used by Netanyahu and Gallant as a method of war. And it's awful that in 2024 we have had to submit these applications to the judges of the ICC for warrants.
I'm going to get into starvation as a weapon of war in a moment, but first I want to ask you...
We're going to kind of skip forward a part. We'll probably... we'll watch this part. This seems to be the most replayed. Again, we're not going to watch the full interview, but we're just going to watch some part of it.
Of legality to conduct. We've done that, and this is why we've made the applications that the judges must determine.
I'm going to read you some heavy criticism that you've received from the United States. As we know, the United States is not a party to the ICC, nor is Israel. Recently, when word came out that this may be happening at some point, U.S. senators and U.S. congresspeople, mostly Republicans, wrote you a letter signed by Senator Tom Cotton, Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and others. This is the quote: "Target Israel and we will target you. If you move forward with the measures indicated in the report, we will move to end all American support for the ICC, sanction your employees and associates, and bar you and your families from the United States. You have been warned." Is that a threat?
I mean, obviously.
I think that's the plain meaning of it in English. But, there's hotheads everywhere, and there's people that are mature statesmen and stateswomen and
Ted Cruz is definitely not one of them.
There are those that have fidelity to something greater than themselves, whether it's their constitutions, but ultimately it's the rule of law. The good news is, I think, for the last 2.5 years, we've had very positive engagement with the Biden administration in the United States. We're working across a range of situations, whether it's in Ukraine or Darfur. And I've said to distinguished members on the Hill and to the administration that Rome Statute values are quintessential American values. It's against bullying. It's against the untrammeled power against the most vulnerable. It's the rights and the dignity of the individual.
Yeah, I do wonder that I'm bringing up Biden's response to this. As we see here from Reuters, Biden calls move against Netanyahu outrageous. This is the same guy who supposedly behind doors says a lot of mean words about Netanyahu. He calls him a lot of mean names, but publicly always seems to fucking support him, doesn't he?
The protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me. We don't view it like that. This court is the legacy of Nuremberg. This court is a sad indictment of humanity. This court should be the triumph of law over power and brute force. Grab what you can, take what you want, do what you will. And we're going to simply be, we're not going to be dissuaded by threats or any other activities, because in the end we have to fulfill our responsibilities as prosecutors, as the men and women of the office, as judges, as the registry, to something bigger than ourselves, which is the fidelity to justice. And we're not going to be swayed by the different types of threats, some of which are public and some maybe are not.
You mentioned without name.
Right. I mean, that's probably all we're going to really watch from that. But yeah, he's going after them. I mean, there's nothing really to garner from there. Honestly, I was hoping for a little bit more. But now we're going to go from one interview to the next. We will be watching this one fully, but I will be playing it at 1.5. America's most pro-Israeli reporter got on Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and let's just see all the stupid fucking shit that he says.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, thank you so much for joining us. A central part of the ICC's charges against you and Gallant is, quote, starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Now, I know that Israel repeatedly claims that enough aid is getting in and there is not a purposeful starvation, and those claiming otherwise are misinformed, are lying. Is Israel going to send a delegation to The Hague to present any evidence to defend itself?
I think these charges are exactly as President Biden called them. They're outrageous. They're beyond outrageous. This is a rogue prosecutor that has put false charges and created false symmetries that are both dangerous.
Yeah, it was Pallywood. That's where all the dead children are coming from. They're coming from Pallywood, Palestinian actors.
And false. And the first false symmetry is he equates the democratically elected leaders of Israel with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying that, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR and Churchill, but also for Hitler. Or I'm issuing arrest warrants for...
I mean, he just compared himself to Hitler in that. Oh. I mean, he probably was trying to compare himself to FDR and, Winston Churchill, but at the same time, yeah, they were also incredibly literally the only reason why Israel really exists as a country today is because U.S. and Britain refused to allow Jewish people into the country after World War II. So they're just like, you can take this. You can just take this land full of a bunch of nobodies and just, take their land and put them under apartheid. That's basically what happened. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, same. What the fuck are we talking about? But yeah, he does. I mean, he was probably trying to make Hamas out to be Hitler, but at the same time, when you compare the two, you're not that far off from him, buddy. You're really not.
George W. Bush, but also for bin Laden. That's absurd.
I mean, that's actually a good point. They are nobody. I mean, I meant that in a way of being that's how the U.S. and Britain saw them. They just saw them as who cares about them? You can just do whatever. But saying George Bush and bin Laden, George Bush is a war criminal. He is. He joked about it. Literally openly just being the war on Iraq was unfair. Ukraine. He was talking about Ukraine, and I accidentally said Iraq, and literally admitted that he knew that what he did was terrible, that he committed a war crime.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway, 75.
No shit, you dumb fuck.
Secondly, the charges are completely false. Let's take this charge of starvation. We put in 500,000 tons.
And then we bomb them. They're not starving, they're already dead. I mean, that's just completely untrue. And that also plays into something that we learned exclusively from The Guardian. Israeli soldiers and police tipping off groups that attack Gaza aid trucks. Individual members of Israeli secret forces are tipping off far-right activists and settlers to the location of aid trucks delivering vital supplies to Gaza, enabling the groups to block and vandalize the convoys according to multiple sources. Settlers intercepting the vital humanitarian supplies to the Strip are receiving information about the location of the aid trucks from members of the Israeli police and military, a spokesperson from the main Israeli activist group behind the barricades told The Guardian. The claim of collision by members of the security forces is supported by messages from internal internet chat groups reviewed by The Guardian, as well as the accounts from a number of witnesses and human rights activists. Those blocking the vehicles say the aid they carry is being diverted by Hamas instead of being delivered to civilians in need, a claim relief agencies reject. U.S. officials have also said that Israel has offered no evidence to support allegations that Hamas is diverting aid. They're literally helping out groups like far-right activists and settlers of being like, hey, here's where the aid trucks are going. Yeah. And here's the thing, because I'm more than certain Netanyahu will say, well, we're not blocking aid. You're helping people who are. You are helping groups who are. We know that now. You dumb fucking piece of shit. Let's go back to it.
Trucks of food and medicine for this population. We've taken 20,000 trucks. We've paved roads to put those trucks in. We've opened border crossings that the Hamas closed down. I've had airdrops that are facilitated, sea route supplies. I mean, the whole thing is absurd. You should know this. I mean, the prices of food in Gaza has dropped by 80%. The markets don't lie. They talk about 23, I think, or 30 cases of malnutrition in a population of 2 million. Okay, the United States in 2022 had 20,000 deaths of malnutrition. That's 3 times more than in Gaza. This is completely false. It's the kind of
because the population of the U.S. and the population of Gaza is the exact fucking same. Oh my God! Imagine being like, oh yeah, there's like 3,000 deaths of stabbings in like Cuba, and there's 30,000 stabbings going on in the U.S. It's the same. That means the same situations happen. No, it's all about percentages. It's all about like the scale. Like yeah, if that was happening in the U.S., it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But like in a place like Cuba, that's a way smaller population. It obviously means more. You dipshit.
slander that has been leveled at the Jewish people for ages, and it's renewed now against the Jewish state. It was false then, it's false now. But one thing, this rogue prosecutor, didn't even bother to come here. He said he'd come here to check the facts. He didn't check the facts. He just went out and demonized the Jewish state, and he's taking the ICC down the route of the General Assembly that passes infinite resolutions, flat earth resolutions against Israel, or the Human Rights Council that used to have a reputation that is completely blown because half the resolutions are against Israel, not against Iran, not against North Korea, not against Syria. It's the same thing. It's outrageous and false and dangerous because it endangers every democracy.
And if you're expecting any sort of like integrity, like journalist integrity from this guy, don't expect it. Jake Tapper is one of the most, literally like what this article says right here, how America's bloodthirsty journalism cheers on Israel's war on Gaza. He is a very pro-Israel journalist, so don't expect any sort of pushback, because this guy, like, if CNN wanted to do propaganda for the Israeli government, he's the best that they can offer, because he will willingly just suck Netanyahu's dick all day long.
We should note, though, it's not just the ICC expressing concerns about the lack of humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. President Biden and his administration and their officials, not to mention European allies of Israel and their officials, they've all been making this case for months that Israel is not letting enough aid in. So when President Biden expresses concern about you not letting enough aid in, is he wrong?
Well, no, we had the same concerns. We were trying to get the aid in. We got the aid in, and Hamas was looting the aid. That's what was happening. They were taking it for themselves or extorting the population. We were letting the aid in from the start. And look, this was my directive from day one. The day one thing was we have to provide, we comport with international law. We comport with the rules of war. We have to get those trucks in. We're getting hundreds of trucks every day in. And that's been an aspect of our conduct of war, because we try to get civilians out of harm's way. We've done things that no country, no army has done in history. It's not me saying that. It's General Petraeus saying that. The head of the urban warfare at West Point, Colonel John Spencer, says it. Israel's gone out of its way, both in humanitarian aid and getting civilians out of harm's way, with millions of text messages, millions of phone calls, and leaflets that we've been giving up the element of surprise. Israel is given here a bum rap. It's I think it's dangerous, because basically it's the first democracy that is being taken.
Yeah, guys, don't forget we gave them like pieces of paper that said we were going to bomb them. That makes us moral, because we gave them paper and said, "Oh, we're gonna bomb you guys, so you should leave, and then we'll just bomb you anyways."
To the dock when it is doing exactly what democracy should be doing in an exemplary way. I think it will endanger all other democracies. Israel may be first. You're next. Britain is next. Others are next too. The second thing that is dangerous about this, Jake, is I think this fans the fires of anti-Semitism that are raging on American campuses and throughout Western capitals. They're pouring gas. He just poured gasoline on it, this rogue prosecutor Khan.
So,
because, people initially will think this is serious. They think the ICC, this is
yeah, and just letting him yap, not cutting him off. Just yap.
It's not.
Well,
it's a travesty
Benjamin
of justice,
and
and it's a pack of lies.
let me ask you, because what Hamas did on October 7th, just to make this clear, what Hamas did is abhorrent, as is the refusal to return the hostages. Oh, abhorrent. But
even though they want to return the hostages, but he won't let them.
whether or not it was Israel's intent, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, including countless children, have been killed and maimed by the IDF in your war against Hamas. Is there anything you and the IDF could have done any
That might be the only pushback you'll ever get.
differently to avoid all the loss of innocent lives in Gaza?
First of all, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. Every child lost, or every woman lost, or every innocent person lost is a tragedy. But for Hamas, it's a strategy. So while we go out of our way to get them out of harm's way, Hamas goes out of its way to keep them in harm's way, shooting at them if they try to leave the battle zones. But many have left.
Just one example.
I can say that. Now, the ratio, because of our actions, the ratio of civilians to combatants killed is the lowest in the history of urban warfare, and certainly dense urban warfare like this. It's about 1 to 1. There are about 14,000 casualties, 14 to 15,000 terrorists killed, and an equal amount of civilians that were unfortunately killed, because that's what happens. But in other arenas, in Fallujah, with a handful of terrorists, 3,000, 4,000 compared to 35,000 in Gaza, the ratio was much bigger than that. The same thing in Mosul. So we've gone out of our way to stop it. And let me tell you, I think that the numbers are also inflated. You know, the UN organizations that are dominated by Hamas in Gaza is giving false information, as is Hamas itself. And people believe these numbers. The other day they came and said, well, it's about 35,000 who are killed, but 10,000 of those we said are women and children. Now we can't say that. We don't know who they are.
Well, whatever the numbers are, it's too many.
In the meantime, the lie circles. Well, look, yes, 1 is too many, but the reason they're there, the reason we have civilian casualties at all, is because Hamas is preventing them from leaving. I'm happy to say that in the Rafah operation that we've conducted, 1 million people actually left. People said, well, there are 1 million people, 1.2 million in Gaza. Where are they going to go? They're going to be trapped. Well, 1,950,000 have already left, and there are very few civilian casualties because we're doing everything.
At this point, there's so much information to prove that he's wrong. And the fact that this fucking moron just lets him yap over and over again, it's complete fucking bullshit.
It's humanitarian. It's responsible. We comport with the laws of war, and we're the ones taken to the dock. And it doesn't give any solace that they're also taking these killers of Hamas, these murderers, and putting them in the dock. As I said, yeah, Hitler's in the dock, but so is FDR, and so is Eisenhower. Absurd.
After 7 months of unity for your wartime government, there seems a lot of disagreement now about your plans for Gaza or lack
thereof. It is
thereof.
important to see what the leader of this state is talking about, so that you know the talking points of how it's all bullshit. How can someone show his face after killing? I mean, that's just basically most world leaders now. That's literally just how it works. I mean, it's not like, Hitler was a shy guy who hid his face a lot. Just with the support of U.S. I think it's also just a case of ego. A lot of these guys are just, they see themselves as untouchable, which for the most part they are. Because, with how much of a superpower the U.S. is, and Israel being a ally of Israel, just being an extension of the U.S. essentially, they see themselves as untouchable. Who would dare come at us when we're a part of the biggest force in the world? So that's what makes the ICC trying to get an arrest warrant for him a big deal, because it has never really happened before. People like him are not afraid to show their face because they just think they have this wall of, they just have this giant shield in front of them.
major military operations in Gaza is over. Benny Gantz wants a plan, or he says he's going to leave your government. Your defense minister, Yoav Gallant, says you don't have a plan. He's basically accusing you of trying to lay the groundwork for an occupation, either civilian or military, in Gaza in the future. Are you denying that the plan is for an occupation of Gaza, or are you taking it off the table?
No, I have a very clear plan. I think the first thing, the day after Hamas, Jake, is the day after Hamas. We have to get rid of Hamas. Otherwise, there's no future for Gaza, no future for peace, and it'll be a tremendous victory for not only...
But that doesn't work, because after you have bombed such a huge amount of Palestinians, but another group like Hamas is just not come forth. That's all that's happened. You can't deal with the situation by just using tactics that would just lead to a new Hamas. Like, people will remember what happened, and they will get angry. They will form groups. They will retaliate. It'll be the same thing over and over again, and the only person to blame is you. But that's what he wants. I honestly believe that's what he wants. He just wants the cycle to continue so he can paint Palestinians as being these war-hungry, violent animals that need to be destroyed.
For Hamas, but for the Iran terror axis that backs it and organizes Hezbollah, the Houthis, and all these other sundry terrorist organizations. So I think we have to defeat Hamas, and we will defeat Hamas. Rafah is the last stronghold of Hamas terrorist battalions. We'll defeat them. That ends the intense part of the fighting. But once Hamas is defeated, what we have to do is have sustained demilitarization of Gaza. And yes, on this, I think the only force that can prevent the resurgence of terrorism for the foreseeable future is Israel. At the same time, I want a civilian administration that is run by Gazans who are neither Hamas nor committed to our destruction.
So you're taking it off the table?
The third thing that we need to do is... No, I'm not. I'm putting it on the table. On the contrary. No, that's not.
I'm saying you're taking off an Israeli occupation of Gaza. You're taking off the table an Israeli occupation.
If you mean resettling Gaza, yeah, it was never in the cards, and I said so openly, and some of my constituents are not happy about it, but that's my position. The third thing that I would do is have a reconstruction of Gaza, if possible, done by the moderate Arab states.
And I wonder why I would need reconstruction. I wonder who destroyed most of it. Curious.
International community. That's demilitarization, civilian administration by local Gazans who are not committed to Israel's destruction, and responsible reconstruction. That, I think, is a realistic plan.
Remember, guys, we tried everything we could to tell them that, to try to limit civilian casualties. We're the most moral government. We're the most moral military. But we'll also bomb, all of their universities, all of their government buildings, everything.
Said so. Look, if some people are not happy with it, maybe they want to put in the Palestinian Authority that is still teaches its children to, seek the destruction of Israel, pays terrorists.
Yeah, and Israel definitely doesn't teach their children how to hate Palestinians with a burning passion.
The more terrorists, the more Jews they kill, the more they pay. Supports terrorism. That's not my position. I want a different future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. I think it'll affect the future of peace in the Middle East, too.
Two more questions for you, sir, because I know your time is limited. 3 people familiar with the ceasefire discussions that fell through earlier this month tell our reporter, Alex Marquardt, that Egyptian intelligence quietly changed the terms that Israel had already agreed to in order to get Hamas on board. Does this raise concerns for you about Egypt being involved moving forward?
Look, I think we have a goal, which is not only to defeat Hamas, but also to release the hostages. My government has been able to secure the release of 124 hostages so far, and we're committed to get the rest. Hamas, unfortunately, has been hunkering down on a demand that is simple. They say, well, we can release the rest of the hostages, maybe. But in order to do that, you have to get out of Gaza, end the war, and allow us basically to regroup and reconquer Gaza. And they vowed to commit the October 7th massacre, this horror of beheadings and raping of women, beheading women after they rape them, the burning of babies, the slaughter of the innocent, the taking of hostages. We'll do that again and again and again. So that's something I won't agree to. And I hope Egypt understands that we can't agree to something like that. That's not something that we can countenance, and neither can the people of Israel. By the way, the overwhelming majority of Israelis support this policy. And I can tell you that the other day, by the way, yesterday, we had a resolution in the Knesset.
Probably the only thing that he's going to say is true.
120 Knesset members supported.
It is a scary amount of how much, well, not a scary amount because, obviously it's terrible, but, it's not surprising that a large amount of people in Israel be in support of this because, they're all Zion. For the most part, they are all Zionists. This is what Zionism creates. It creates people who are bloodthirsty for the supposed enemy who will cheer on acts that this guy will do until his actions lead to the deaths of family members and friends that they know who are killed because of his abhorrent actions that they wanted.
A resolution that says you cannot accept the ICC statement. You cannot accept it. We'll reject it. It's a farce, and we have to stand up to it. And I can tell you, I don't remember that Israelis, I don't remember the Knesset agreeing, 106 Knesset members out of 120 agreeing on anything.
But Mr. Prime Minister, you say that the majority of the American people are with you on this plan, but a poll from the Israel Democracy Institute from this month showed a majority of Israelis, 56%, say getting the hostages back home should be a higher priority than military action in Rafah. So don't you just fundamentally disagree with the majority of the Israeli people?
Well, I've seen other numbers, but I take a different thing. I don't say this is more important than that is more important. I say both of them are important. And in fact, the military action that we're taking against Hamas is, in fact, the way to get these hostages. Because without military pressure, basically without squeezing them, Hamas is not going to give up anything. That's the reason they gave up the first half of the hostages, and that's the reason they'll give up the second half. So I see them as complementary and not contradictory goals, and I intend to fulfill both of them.
Before you go, sir, we should note, well, we appreciate your talking to us. According to the independent Israeli media monitor, the Seventh Eye, you've done about 24 interviews since October 7th, but all of them in English, and all the outlets outside Israel. I don't want to begrudge that. I appreciate you doing an interview with us, but why are you not speaking with Israeli journalists the way you are with me?
That's the tendentious reporting of a lot of the Israeli media. So I can tell you what they're not telling you is I've done, I don't know if it's 24 or 20 or 15 press conferences with Israeli media. They can ask anything they want, and they do. And I just met Israeli reporters the other day in Rafah, in fact, 3 days ago, and they asked me all the questions they want. So that's simply not true. I speak to them, and I speak to you, and I welcome the opportunity to.
But it's also because if he actually did a one-on-one interview instead of just a bunch of press conferences, if he did a one-on-one interview, it would probably be like really laying it in of being like, you need to do better with these hostages. Like you need to, like, what's your plans on having a better solution into getting the hostages back? Because again, like what he showed there is not what I was referring to when I was talking about like where is it? Where's the chart? This is in reference to like his, strategy when it comes to hostages. Like what's getting the hostages back. People are in more support of that because they don't agree with what he's doing. But like for what he's been doing just to Palestinians, it's hugely popular. But he knows if he was to talk to Israeli journalism, like Israeli journalists on a one-on-one conversation, they would very much focus on that. They would most focus on what he's doing or what he's not doing with the hostages. Now we're just going to kind of just talk about other updates that's been going on. Ireland, Spain, Norway say they recognize a Palestinian state. This is obviously a big deal because for the most part, outside of like Western nations, most of the world agrees with a Palestinian state. But the reason why this is important is because they are like the first group of nations around the Western world that are agreeing to this. Ireland, Spain, and Norway have announced plans to formally recognize a Palestinian state next week, in a move that is likely to bolster the global Palestinian cause but further strain relations between Europe and Israel. The three European nations say their landmark decision is the best way to achieve lasting peace in the Middle East, and it sparked swift condemnation from Israel as its foreign minister ordered the immediate recall of its ambassadors from these countries. I'm not that aware of like Spain and Norway's, their prime minister's takes on what's been going on, but the Irish prime minister had a very, maybe viral moment would be the right term, because just a few months ago, 2 months ago, he pushed against Biden and called for a ceasefire when he was like visiting the White House. Like this was something that like, it wasn't like, it didn't stay in the news for a long time, but it was a very small moment within all this that took place where it was just like, wow, like he went there and he was just like, yeah, ceasefire, bitch, do it. I'm calling for a ceasefire. You better too, pussy. But yeah, like that's not surprising for Ireland. But Spain and Norway, I was not familiar with their game. Most of the world already recognizes Palestinian states. More than 140 out of 193 member states of the United Nations have made their recognition official, but only some nations in the 27-member European Union are among them. Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris told a Wednesday news conference in Dublin, today Ireland, Norway, and Spain are announcing that we recognize the state of Palestine. Each of us will now undertake whatever national steps are necessary to give effect to that decision. It's showing, like with this, the ICC prosecutor going after Netanyahu and the UN calling for a ceasefire, which we will get into next. It feels like people are finally taking the steps towards like actually affecting change. Like I said multiple times throughout my videos about Israel and Palestine that I try to stay hopeful, but a lot of times it just looks incredibly bleak for obvious reasons because nothing really happens, and I don't really expect much to change from this, like purely out of these circumstances for now. But I see it as like a step in the right direction towards like a better, actually fixing the problem. It does make me a little bit more hopeful, but unfortunately, we also will talk about this. which definitely makes me less hopeful, but hopefully the outcry from this leads to more progress. UN calls for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Biden warns Israel is losing support. The United Nations on Wednesday demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip as U.S. President Joe Biden warned Israel it was losing international support because of its indiscriminate bombing of civilians in its war against Hamas militants. After dire warnings by UN officials after a deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the 193-member UN General Assembly passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire, 153 countries voting in favor and 23 abstaining. The U.S. and Israel, which argue a ceasefire only benefits Hamas, voted against the measure along with 8 other countries. The resolution is not binding but carries political weight. And I talked about this the last time we kind of talked about this. There was like a UN committee that, called for a ceasefire, and then immediately afterwards, not immediately, sometimes afterwards, we obviously saw the invasion of Rafah. Again, when it comes to upholding international law, and it's something that I didn't really get into when it came to the arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Essentially what that means is that any nation that Netanyahu goes to, if it falls within the ICC jurisdiction, if he just kept to Israel, he will be fine. He won't get arrested if he just stays in Israel. But any other country that kind of falls within the ICC jurisdiction, if he goes to there, they can just arrest him. So again, as long as he just doesn't travel, he'll be fine. And with this, the resolution is not binding. It's very difficult to, actually hold people accountable to international law because there's no international police. The UN does not have an army or police force that can go after people it deems to be criminals under international law. It's just hey, this is what we think of you. Okay, are you going to do anything about it? No, but you just know that this is what we think of you. But obviously it is a terrible look for them. And the pressure on this I think they're hoping the pressure on Israel will force them to stop, but Netanyahu's already shown that he's such a fucking bloodthirsty maniac that I don't think it will be that much of a difference for him unless someone gets involved. I think the best course of action is that with so much international pressure, eventually the U.S. will have to actually step in and be okay, we're doing something to make sure that you can't go further with this. They kind of did that with the weapons ceasefire, but more so. Well, not the ceasefire, though, Biden stopping weapons from coming in. But again, we'll see. Biden's shown to have a very weak spine when it comes to dealing with them. But who knows? If the international backlash keeps piling on as it seems to be, then hopefully it will force him into a situation. But he has been very headstrong, so even then it's we'll have to see about that. But yeah, obviously, I look at stuff like this and I obviously see it as a step in the right direction. But unfortunately, we're still having to deal with a lot of tragedy as we see here. This happened last night. Israel's airstrikes on Rafah displacement camp condemned. Toll climbs to 45. So this happened last night during the invasion. And I'll just read the article right here. The death toll from the Israeli Defense Force attack on a displacement camp in city of Rafah grew to 45 on Monday as nations condemned the airstrikes, including France, Turkey, and Egypt. The Palestinian Red Crescent said the attacks Saturday night were carried out over displaced persons tents near the United Nations headquarters northwest of Rafah, saying the location was designated as a humanitarian zone. The Hamas-run health ministry claimed that most of the casualties were women and children. Around half of the population were estimated to have been sheltering in Rafah until May 6, when the IDF began its controversial military operation in the city. Video obtained by CNN shows people digging through rubble and removing debris near a class building. The IDF said a Hamas compound was struck in the Tel Sultan area where senior officials in the terror group were gathered. The attack was carried out against terrorists who are a target for attack in accordance with international law, using precision munitions and based on intelligence indicating the use of the area by Hamas terrorists. IDF noted that there were reports of a striking of fire that spread into a camp for displaced Palestinians. The military said it was investigating and is committed to seeing through it to its conclusion. Sure, because they are so great at investigating their own crimes, aren't they? And, of course, what would a, unprecedented attack on Palestinian civilians be without Benjamin Netanyahu saying something completely fucking disgusting? Despite our efforts not to hurt them, this was a tragic misstep. We are investigating the incident. For us, it's a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. Go fuck yourself. Again, I'm very hopeful with what's been going on in terms of like international pressure. We haven't really seen that much when it comes to affecting Israel, but I think the fact that we're seeing a lot more support come out is a good thing and hopefully does lead to change. But at the end of the day, Netanyahu seems to not be willing to change from his bloodthirsty ways. Oh, it's just so fucked. But yeah, that's all I really had to say on the topic so far as of this moment, but it's, always changing, always growing, always gets worse, but hopefully we're heading into a better situation. Maybe a little bit too late at this point, but we'll see.